Well, greetings to everyone. Paul J. Leslie on Expanding Perceptions channel, and I want to welcome a really special lady today. Emmy Vadnais is with me. Emmy is an occupational therapist, a holistic health coach, a consultant, an author, and an intuitive healer. She's the author of her latest book, which I highly recommend, is called Intuitive Development: How to Trust Your Inner Knowing for Guidance. And I think if whatever field you're in, whether it's medicine, therapy, healing, law, engineering, this is a book I think that really can open your eyes a little bit and help you. So Emmy, thanks so much for being with me today.
Thank you for having me, Paul. It's an honor and a pleasure to be here.
Okay, excellent. Well, I'm honored. I wanted to ask you, how did you, this journey that you've had, you're being an occupational therapist, being trained in the medical model, just briefly, how did you come to be able to start embracing more intuition in your healing work?
Well, so I've been an occupational therapist for about, I think it's 25 years now. And when I was a new occupational therapist, I was working with a lot of people with end of life, which is what we do as OTs. That's part of the population of people we work with. However, I was very young and naive, and with my training as an OT, we help people in many different capacities, but one of the ways in mainstream healthcare is recovery from things like having a stroke or brain damage, or it could be something as like an orthopedic injury or something like that. And we work closely with physical therapists and speech therapists. But early on in my career, I was working with end of life, and I didn't realize it. I would approach it much differently now that I'm more mature. But at any rate, I got kind of disillusioned because I recognized that these people were having their limbs cut off. They were having stroke and heart attack after heart attack, and going blind and having cognitive impairments, which I know some of these things can happen, but I felt like I was on the front line of a battlefield, quite frankly, and it was sad. And I really was interested in preventative medicine, and I'd heard about that when I was in OT school, but here in the US, our mainstream Western medical society of capitalism at this point doesn't really reimburse for preventative medicine. And so I really wanted to be on the other side of healthcare, excuse me, and help people be well. And so essentially I burned out after about a year or two of being an occupational therapist. And I have gone back and worked in some of those mainstream settings and found jobs that were better suited and so forth. And I learned about something called energy healing from a couple physical therapists. And I thought, well, if they are saying that you can affect somebody positively with their health and healing without physically touching them, I really want to learn more about that. And so I was always interested in like the maps of acupuncture. It always had intrigued me. I think some of that, esoteric knowledge always just sort of compelled me. And so when I sort of felt like I crashed and burned at a young age early on in my professional career, I went ahead and started taking some classes in Qigong energy healing just to explore it, to kind of see, because I approached it very skeptically. And I thought, well, this doesn't seem like it could really be real, but I know PTs, they're very physically oriented. And if they're saying that this could happen, I really want to explore this. So I embarked on about a 2-year medical Qigong energy healing training program at a holistic health and wellness center. It was the first one here in the Twin Cities, which was, as fate would have it, right around the corner from the apartment where I was living at the time. And so I started actually working at the front desk, and I quickly became the office manager. And then I became the administrator to the Qigong school. And through that process of cultivating our Qi, our energy, I learned how to help people with their energy, their mind, body, spirit from that perspective. Now, Qigong is rooted in traditional Chinese medicine. And so really intuition is the fundamental component for that. And I met my intuitive teacher and then really developed a meditation practice and learned how to cultivate and work with my own energy, and then started helping others. And we had a free clinic where we would work with people who would just, quote, come off the streets. And it was amazing because there were times that in the health history, they omitted information. And I was able to pick up on things that they hadn't told me. And so it just started proving itself to me on how I was able to pick up on that subtle energy by using my intuition.
Hmm. You're talking about the qigong, and I find I've studied that for many years myself, and I find if nothing else, it just seems to clear your head a little bit, other than the other physical benefits. And it does tend to, at least, and this is totally anecdotal on my part, tends to kind of quiet things down right after. So sometimes between my clients, I'll just take a minute to just kind of, as I say, run the orbit, if you will. And it does tend to give me a little kind of more openness for incoming information, whether that's something that I just might not have visually noticed before, or more esoteric realms. It's fun. I just want to bring this up, and again, this is the healthcare provider in me, so I won't belabor for the audience this this whole idea lately in healthcare, particularly Western healthcare, of productivity and things like that. It's very difficult, I think, for most practitioners in any type of healing art who are dealing with that, dealing with managed care and all. Just briefly, before we really get into the meat, do you have any short, quick advice for anyone who wants to bring more of the holistic healing, intuitive work into those kind of settings?
Oh, yeah. Well, I think that I do want to, in just a moment, comment on what you just said about preparing in between sessions and so forth, because I love that. And that's something that I've done as well. Yeah. So productivity. So you're asking about how people might want to bring some of these holistic integrative health approaches in, given productivity standards. Is that what you're?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So I actually teach continuing education to healthcare professionals on a variety of different types of integrative health approaches. And what I typically share with those folks is that it's really just another tool in the toolkit. So
Mhm.
it's learning. So for example, like we're talking about energy healing, or using focused attention or meditation, which is really what we're doing when we're cultivating energy as well. There's a lot happening. So that's something that us as a practitioner can use, like you were just talking about, kind of centering before and in between sessions and so forth. But actually using it in a session with a client, it's really just another tool that you would want to use through whatever scope of practice whether you're a licensed mental health practitioner, a physician, or a nurse, or a social worker. And I think it's something that a lot of people are really looking for, right? Just what you just said, centering yourself throughout the day. And I think that people are looking for ways to cope and manage with stress. And so when I think about these holistic integrative health approaches, to me, the keystone is really the relaxation response. Not that we just need to go around as jellyfish. And I'm prone to anxiety myself, probably why I've gone so deeply into a lot of this over the years. It's helped me a lot and continues to help me on my healing journey. And so that's something that I think really any healthcare professional can impart to their clients, and that it's really something that can be used as a billable service, because it's something that everybody is really seeking out. And so I would just encourage people who are listening that if you aren't trained in some of these approaches, to think about which ones appeal to you, and to go and to get some more continuing education on those, and then talk with the instructor, and maybe it's somebody who's in your own field, to learn how you would bring that into your own practice. Because a lot of people think that these integrative health approaches, because they've been called alternative for so many years, are outside of mainstream. But what's been happening, as you know, Paul, is that they're being integrated, and that's why they're called integrative
Right.
health, into mainstream healthcare, and really have a lot of great research behind them as well.
Hmm. Right. Yeah, and unfortunately, I'm afraid that so much of it has been too attached to kind of new age beliefs in some practitioners' mind, that they have a lopsided perception of the modality. So I totally, and I think it's changing, and I'm delighted that it is. But everything kind of takes time. Well, this is kind of and maybe I'm jumping ahead, but this is the burning question I have. And we can flesh this out a little more. Intuition is such a natural part of life. I mean, it really is. But why is it that so many practitioners of any field the ones who really tend to stand out are the ones who have that grounding in the rational, if you will, but then be open enough to just, even if it sounds a little out of the ordinary, to accept that intuitive kind of push. And I wonder if this is just a Western thing where we're rewarded how much control we're in control, and if we're more rational, you get the gold star. Oh, you're evidence based, or you're this or that, kind of thing. So I just, in my field, there's so much hesitancy to sometimes just to ethically let go, to where you're still ethics, having your ethics going. And so you're not doing things, but just if you feel the need to say or do something, if it's within that paradigm, just to do it. I mean, what have you kind of encountered in your work as far as a teacher and a colleague to get people to be more open to their own intuitive healing abilities?
Well, I think you bring up a really good point. I think that in our modern era of health, and just how people want to think that and I think it's for the betterment, really, and protection of people, that we do have evidence-based practice, and that there is research. And I am a fan of that, but I think you and I know, and probably many of the listeners, that no matter how much research you share with certain people, they're still not going to believe it, because they have their own innate belief system, and it might threaten their own egos. So I've learned over the years, having worked alongside physicians and nurses, that the people who are ready to embrace this will embrace it. And I've also learned that I can't force this on anybody. However, I've let the work speak for itself. So, for example, when I was newly part of what's now called the Penny George Institute for Health and Healing at Abbott Northwestern Hospital in Minneapolis, we were sent out to work with patients. I didn't know it at the time, but my supervisor was having us work with the most challenging patients who were not responding to pain and anxiety medications, who had already been seen by the pain doctor. And this is at a major hospital that serves a 5-state area. And we were able to get a lot of their pain and anxiety levels down, oftentimes by 50% or more, 80% of the time. And a study did come out after that. And while that was developing, and I had actually worked at this hospital when I was in college as an EKG tech. So I had formed relationships with some of these physicians. And one of them was a cardiologist, one of the, very prominent cardiologists there. And he said, well, I don't know what you've done with Mrs. Jones, but she's feeling better and it's making my day easier. So even if it's a placebo, I'd like you to do some more. And by the way, I've got some more patients to send your way. And so that's how that program really snowballed in a good way. And more people took notice and recognized that something was happening. And I think this is why integrative health has really grown, is because people have received benefit. Now, I know it's not a panacea. I'm not against pharmaceuticals. I'm all for medications. I think they're overused. In fact, we know now that the Joint Commission that accredits hospitals and healthcare organizations, even a couple of years ago, put out a statement that they want to have every organization they accredit to have at least one non-pharmacological approach to pain. So I think that some of these practical, pragmatic, real ways that they can help people in acute situations are just a really prime example of the microcosm of the macrocosm of how it can really help people.
Right. Well, as we're talking about intuition, I probably need to just kind of, for our viewers, our listeners, to get an idea specifically, how do you define intuition? Because there may be some differences in how somebody may feel intuition. They'll just call it the gut feeling. But how do you define it when you're teaching this?
Well, sure. There's, of course, like you say, there's many different definitions. I think a simple definition is that it's a way of knowing without rational thought, or a way of knowing without knowing how you know it, really. Yeah. And it's like you said, before we started here today with our brief, lovely conversation beforehand, that this is innate to all of us. And it's, when I think about even me, like, quote, teaching intuition, it seems that's a misnomer, because really I feel like I'm helping people uncover it.
Right.
It's really just who they are. And it's something that people, I think, have come to doubt within themselves. And that's really, I think, a big piece that can help people to trust it more, is to, like you say, let go, which is why things like meditation, relaxation techniques, various activities that can help you not think about the past or the future and come more in the present moment, are going to help you to connect more with your own inner self. Another way to describe it would be inner wisdom or inner knowing. And people can get caught up in their emotions, as you know, being a therapist, a psychotherapist
Yeah.
yourself, that people can get caught up in doubt and fear,
Yeah.
and then have layers of grief, trauma. And so then the filter through which they are able to experience and then perceive the world and share their intuition can be muddled. And so that's why we were talking about those centering practices with Qigong and other forms of meditation and prayer, whatever belief or religious or spiritual leanings a person might have, that can help somebody to really get that glass more clear and see more clearly.
Right. As you were saying that you felt it's odd to teach someone how to use intuition because it's already there. It reminded me of, we were talking about Qigong. I remember I did a short, like an hour, 2 hour workshop for other therapists about Qigong, using breathing, centering, and those kind of things. And at the end, this old, it looks like he's about to be retired guy came up with a smile. He says, "I just gave you money to teach me how to breathe." And I was like, a little more to it, but yeah, in a way, because you could be doing more with your breath, and I think it's the same thing. You already have intuition, you say to the client or the customer, but you could be doing so much more with it. Um, Fear seems to be so prominent in that, allowing intuition to kind of to go through, but this isn't something just for medical professionals. Just kind of, can you speak to just in our daily lives, our relationships, because your book talks a good bit about relationships, not just romantic, but just relationships in general, utilizing intuition in that realm.
Well, definitely. And thank you for bringing up relationships, because first and foremost, I believe it's about having a good and healthy, positive relationship with ourselves first and foremost.
Mm-hmm.
And that from there, as you know, then everything really connects to that. So on a day-to-day basis, I think that intuition can really help us to understand how to enjoy our lives and become our best selves and heal wounds. I believe we all are wounded healers. And in my opinion, I believe that we're here to learn and develop and grow, and that through our challenging experiences, we learn a lot, and through relationships, through ourselves and others, we learn more about ourselves and how to be more loving and compassionate. In fact, I think that intuition really, to me, is quite synonymous also with love. And the reason that I say that is because it is detached from the clutter of the mind, of the false perceptions and the false experiences and so forth. And so by being able to cultivate, or really, there's a quote from Lao Tzu, if I'll say it exactly correctly, I might paraphrase, but basically, can you sit long enough to let the mud settle in the mind until the water is clear? And that's how I think of intuition. And this is why it does take a little bit of practice. It's kind of like my husband's a chef. It's kind of like making a recipe. The first time you make it, you kind of maybe didn't put the ingredients in the correct way, or bake it a certain amount of time. And so maybe the cake or whatever you're making didn't come out quite the right way, but then you can finesse it a little bit more each time and fine tune it as you go. And so with intuition, it is that when you talk about helping that person with their breath, it's being able to be okay with ourselves. And I think most people are running from themselves. And this is why I think practices like Qigong, like yoga, can help us. And even Dr. Herb Benson, we know, repetitive exercise and walking, jogging, maybe the elliptical, whatever works for you, so that you can help the physiology, right? Because it's a mind, body, spirit connection. It's not just the mind. So that we can, as you were saying with the breath, lower the breath rate, because that's going to shift the physiology in the body. It's going to slow the brain waves down. It's going to slow those fast thoughts so that we can perceive more clearly. And it seems that when we can get into those, sometimes referred to as altered states of consciousness, but when we get into those states where where our brain waves are a little bit more slower, although sometimes intuition can be a flash and come quickly, but we're able to perceive the all better. So we can get that higher cognitive perspective. And so with relationships, we can then see ourselves more clearly.
Mhm.
How are we in relationships? How loving are we? How mean or unkind are we? Are we being self-serving? How can we improve our relationships? And so we can then understand where we might have areas that need improvement. And we can understand how, if somebody maybe speaks to us in a way that's uncomfortable, we can then also take that and use the practices that can help cultivate intuition to heal that more. But as far as just one more little thought on this is that so I'm kind of talking to people who are maybe a little bit newer to intuition, but once, or meditation or whatever you're using to help cultivate it, that once you have cultivated it more, it will help you to know the right response to say. That's, in my opinion, for those all, the best response for all who are concerned. And the best choices, how to make the best choices. I think a lot of people struggle with making decisions in life. And I found intuition has helped me tremendously, and the people I've served, on how to make good decisions, because we can get so muddled. We're not quite sure, first of all, who do we even have as a friend or a partner?
Mhm.
My parent abused me. Do I continue a relationship with them? If so, how do I continue a relationship with them? What boundaries do I set? And I think that being able to come more into the center of yourself and your heart and your being, you can get more clarity on how to be more loving to yourself and others.
Because we oftentimes have these reactive patterns that have been built up over years, and they feel so natural to us because they've just fired so much. But there's a space beyond the reactive pattern that when you feel it, if you can, like say, quiet it down, the noise, and you can feel it, it's like, okay, that, even though it might not make sense, that feels more, and I feel somatically, like kind of embodied, that feels more true, or that seems like the better option. But I think if we're running our stuff, our stories, our past traumas, all of that, and that's the foremost way of interacting with the world, it does seem like how do we get to intuition? So it is a process to kind of peel away those things to allow that to emerge, I guess.
I like what you say about the somatics, and I know in the mental health world, that is the term for the body,
Mhm.
soma, the body. And so you're right, through intuition, we experience it through all of our senses and beyond. There's a term that's used a lot in occupational therapy and maybe other professions that I wouldn't know, but I hear it a lot in OT anyways, interoception. So it's really all of our inner experiences, and that can help us to connect with our intuition. And there's ways that I help people to recognize which senses are more active when they are intuiting, because then they can pay attention to those senses again as they go forward, because that's going to be sort of like a guidepost or a way of knowing that you're listening to your intuition. And then as you go forward, having had experiences where your intuition served you and others well, then you will have a better felt sense in your body on when your intuition is flowing for you. And I love what you said too about centering with Qigong, because how I was taught is that we talk about the microcosmic orbit, which is connecting with the macrocosm, the heaven and the earth, which is the yin and the yang. And so we're bringing that harmony and that oneness. We're connecting ourselves to the heaven and the earth, and then we're being a conduit for that and connected to the all, where we can, from what I understand, get all information. And this is where, if a person really goes deeply enough into it, you can get tremendous insights. And there's Brian Weiss is an example where he's a psychiatrist who started using hypnotherapy with a patient of his, and the patient started giving him information about his family members that no one else knew about.
Mhm.
And I think that you yourself, Paul, I think I saw an interview where you've had experiences similar to that with patients, and I know I have as well. And that's why I talk publicly about this, is because it's something that happens to all of us, but not everybody knows how to make sense of it.
Right.
And I think the more that, and thank you so much, Paul, for doing this, because the more that we can, for lack of a better word, I don't love this word because I don't feel like I'm normal, but normalize it.
Right.
Although maybe I am normal because we all have these experiences, and some people aren't aware of them, or they it can get muddled with psychiatric diagnoses, or people will think that's, you're quote crazy, which is unfortunate. That's a very unfortunate term. So.
Yeah. It's, I kind of find that when I read about different fields, and I hear about like the investment gurus, and so much of what they do when you hold them their feet to the fire is, they looked at the numbers, but their gut told them to do something. I know certainly in my field, there's a lot of intuition that the big names sometimes don't admit that that's why they made their brilliant observation. It's because it was a gut feeling rather than their theory. And I just kind of, I wonder too, is maybe some of this, if to be great at what you do, you have to use some intuition. I mean, you hear in sports all the time, you got the football plays, but that intuitive where the coach or whoever goes, no, let's do this one, even though you just do it. And then it's, the touchdown, is it because maybe one reason is it's really hard to standardize intuition?
Paul, maybe this is something we can embark on together. Maybe there is a way to standardize intuition. I think it's because people are in the flow. When you're talking those descriptions to me in Qigong, right? It's connected. It's in the flow. It's moving. It's happening. It's a feeling. It's a knowing.
Right.
I liken it to, and I'm sure other people have, there's different metaphors for this, but I think about, when you're first riding a bike, you kind of fall, you lean to the side, you lose your balance. You might even fall all the way down and skin your knee or elbow. But then pretty soon, as you're going, you're just flowing and you're not thinking about it. Right. That's intuition. Right. And that is what's so beautiful about it, is that it's almost like being with no thought. Yes. And that's hard for some people. And that's why it's a letting go. And the exercises that help with it are the ones that are really about just being able to be, which is, I think, what we're all really learning to cultivate here, being on Earth as well. And that's why I think it's not always easy for people. And it's trusting, and it's letting go of doubt. And you mentioned fear. Absolutely. To me, I think fear, my husband and I just watched the new Dune, Fear is the Mind Killer. And so that absolutely will block you. That will block you from information, from that access to that knowing.
Well, if you can, would you be able to kind of do just an overview of how, when a patient comes to you, whether it's in occupational therapy or even the holistic health coaching that you do such a great job at, do you kind of, I guess what I'm asking is, when and where do you feel like the intuition comes in? Is it a person by person, moment by moment thing? Or is it just something at this point you don't think about, you just kind of comes out, you just go with it?
Well, that's a great question. I think all of those things are happening. So it first happens with the client intake, where I ask the client, what are they, their challenges? And then I always ask them, do they suffer from stress? Which pretty much everybody does, but some people will interestingly not say that they do. But it gives me a sense of how they're experiencing their world. And then I ask if they have any spiritual or religious practices, because that helps me to understand their those views
Right.
and what we can draw upon for strengths. And I also ask them, how will they know when they've reached their goal?
Good.
Because they're giving me the answer to to maybe not necessarily what will help them, but what they know, what the final, when they get to that finish line will be like for them.
Right.
And I usually ask people, what do you think will help you? What do you need? And so that's where that coaching model comes in. And that's really, I think, why coaching has really taken off as well, as because really coaching, from at least my perspective, is it's all about helping the client come to their own answers within. And you can do that through therapeutic dialogue for sure. But you can also do it through, because of fear and doubt and past trauma and wounds. And as I mentioned, that keystone or that fulcrum in my practice is around stress, quote, stress management. Every client who comes to me, I'm offering ways to help them with relaxation and meditation. And that happens on the very first session. And guided imagery, which these are all just terms, but they're all ways of working with our consciousness. And so that I'm helping them to understand themselves more and to get settled so they can trust themselves, because that's really what intuition is, right? There's fear and then there's trust. And sometimes, interestingly, just to, trying to not confuse the process, but the truth is that sometimes fear is our intuition. So that's where that word discernment is so important with intuition, is being able to discern, is this fear because I'm questioning it and I'm too in my head and it's based on past experiences and conditioning, and that's why healing is so important? Or is this fear because this is something that I need to truly have an aversion to and or at least stay away from?
Yeah, as you're saying that, I remember a situation where a business proposal thing came my way, and it seemed like one of the things that I'd always wanted to happen, and yet I couldn't get rid of this nagging fear of moving forward. So it was pretty stressful for me, because is it me? Am I thinking? Is it in my head? Is it because, and anytime you do something new, there's an element of the unknown, and particularly with business and money, we go into, major alert. And I just eventually just said, okay, I'm just going to have to trust my gut here. And then for about a couple of months, I was daily beating myself up. And about 3 or 4 months later, this whole situation just kind of imploded, and some people involved weren't quite who I thought they were. And it's like, okay, it really was, I think, in my gut telling me, And what's really cool is that I think was one of the turning points into, okay, you got to start trusting yourself more. And I guess that's going back to evidence, is that maybe that's the evidence that I needed. And sometimes I think other people may need evidence. I just want to speak to the question you did, which is kind of that kind of solution oriented way you coach, which I think is so wonderful. One of the questions I ask, very similar, is, when you no longer need to see me, what's different? And it's amazing how, as you say, the client's patients will just tell you exactly everything that they need to do. And it's like you almost feel sometimes, well, why are you coming to see me? Because I'll be eating better, I'll be sleeping better, I won't be blowing up so much, or I'll start slowing down and pacing and it's all this stuff. And it is remarkable how much we kind of keep tightened up, and it's almost like we do need that coach or therapist or even friend, pastor, whoever, to go, might want to do those things. And it's almost like we have to have somebody on the outside to give us permission, or at least to move our awareness to what it is that we intuitively know we need to do.
Yeah, exactly. And I love how you do that. And absolutely, I've pondered that myself as well. And I think that people in my life, my close friends and family, look at the challenges I experience and they're probably scratching their head like, why is this so hard for her?
Yeah.
But I think that we do need those relationships, and our therapists or coaches also bring that unconditional love, unconditional acceptance, compassion. and an opportunity for us to work out our psyches. I mean, I agree. I don't quite understand it all, but I've pondered that myself as well. One comment I just want to make too about trusting your intuition, and I would imagine as you went forward after that business deal that you then recognized how you intuited. So that probably helped you going forward, making other decisions, is that one tool that's helped me a lot, in addition to meditation, various mind, body, spirit practices, is making my own intuitive cards. And I was taught this by my teacher years ago. And I outlined in my book how to do it. And I think I probably do a class on it at some point. But essentially, it's a way of sort of like art therapy, but it's a way of accessing your own knowing when maybe you're not feeling that you can settle and get as quiet in yourself as you would like. And it's very similar to the process of like tarot or I Ching or runes, but it's just a way to allow yourself to speak to yourself, kind of like how you were just describing your clients telling you the problem and the solution and the interventions that would help. and so for those listening, when you think, oh my gosh, some people think, oh, it's going to take too long to cultivate this, or I'm not good at that, or I do doubt it, or it just comes to me randomly. You can actually get it more under, again, I don't love this word, but more under your control, or a better way to say it is for it to serve you better in your life. And so just know that there are certain tools out there that really can be a reflection of your inner self, so that you can strengthen that. And then over time, you'll trust it more. That's the beauty of it. And then as you go forward, you will have experiences where you'll have hindsight, and then you'll just get more confident with it. And then it just builds it. And that's what I've had to do, or not had to do, but what has helped me the most in healing sessions with people over the years is getting out of the way, letting go. And just like you said, when somebody, a practitioner might have some thought that comes into their mind that is seemingly a non sequitur. That's happened to me, where I'll just say, for some reason, I'm picking up on, I don't know what it would be, rivers. For some reason, rivers are coming to mind. Oh, I just was out on the river yesterday with my niece, and I haven't seen them in a while. And it was the most relaxed I've been in a long time. And then from there, you can start this conversation, this beautiful unfolding of what this river and that experience was, and how healing that could be for somebody. That's just one example.
Yeah. Is the using the cards and all that. I think those are excellent creative tools. As you were saying that, I was remembering an interview with the musician David Bowie, where he talked about a technique he used. I think he got it from William S. Burroughs, I'm not sure, but called the cut-ups. And he would take newspapers and cut out the headlines and then cut individual words, and over a week or two, so he'd have this whole jar of different words, and he would just or phrases, and he just reach in and mix them up and then pull out 3 or 4. And he said, just looking at them and arranging them, that would be one line of a song lyric that suddenly then the music would flow into his mind. And he was so prolific and probably, in my opinion, one of the most creative rock musicians of the 20th century. But that freed him to just allow that faucet to turn on and to flow. So yeah, those can be very beneficial, I think, just having that as a catalyst to allowing that to come through.
Definitely. Yes. And a way to to just reconnect with yourself and to get into that space so that things can flow. Absolutely.
Mm-hmm. Well, I just wanted to kind of ask you a little bit, when you are working in general, and do you get, like say, an image of a river or something like that? Do you ever get something so intense pop in your head that it's almost like, the universe is knocking on your, and it will not leave you alone until you say it, and you're like, I don't even know why, kind of like the river? Do you get like a lot of pressure sometimes until okay, I have to interrupt you, I'm going to say X or do something?
Oh, absolutely. One of the ways that I work with people is providing energy healing, which really is using intuition. And again, the more that I'm learning from other people, like our friend Jeffrey Mishlove and folks from that camp, which is just so many amazing, beautiful, insightful, intelligent people, is that I'm able to connect to that all. And so when I'm focused, really it's just focusing. So for example, when I'm doing energy healing with somebody, I will place my hand over or just focus my attention on each of the chakras one at a time and just sit. And what's interesting with intuition is that intuition is receiving information. It's getting that information. So we need to be able to let that come in. And so I was taught and teach others how to, again, use all the senses to receive information. And so absolutely, Paul, I've gotten some of the most, I've seen tigers around people. I've seen, of course, past relatives come through. I've worked with women who've had miscarriages or abortions, who have been raped. I've been able to pick up, they never told me these things, and I have to work very gingerly and very carefully when I'm picking up on these things on, I'm sensing this in this area. Does this mean anything to you? Yeah. It might relate to, the reproductive system or, and so eventually, usually what happens pretty much all the time is that people are able, they feel safe, and then they're able to open up and share what that experience was. And then that can be very cathartic for them. And so then I, just work up all the chakras, and I just am able to pick up on what energy is theirs, what's others, where are things flowing, where are their challenges, and how they might be able to expand. And then from there, we can just get more intuitive understanding in a multidimensional way. That's what's so great about intuition and that mind, body, spirit, is that it isn't just a linear way of working with somebody or for a person to move forward with just one end goal, right? It isn't just like, I want to lose weight, or I want to have my dad not verbally abuse me, right? It's a multidimensional way of going forward and helping the person also connect to, and again, another way of thinking of intuition is spirituality, because we think of spirituality, at least most people, I think of it as a connection to something greater than ourselves, but also as sort of like a metaphysical experience, right? That's not, even though in my opinion, the physical world is also spiritual. It's not separate.
Yeah. You don't have that, making that distinction that this and that, it's kind of, and I think that's a common, I think the great thinkers in our history have never made that distinction, spiritual, material. It's just kind of all, all the same.
Yeah. And intuition can help people open to that when they might not have otherwise been open to it, which is a whole other realm of dimensions that can support us in who we are.
Mm-hmm. And I think the cool thing about intuition is if you really look, you don't have to be someone who is into like new age beliefs, new thought, or any of that. There's plenty, if they'll take the time to actually do the research. As I like to tell my students, Google Scholar is your friend. Please feel free to look up peer-reviewed journals. There's more and more stuff coming out about the positive effects of intuition from a more materialist perspective. Maybe are certain cues that our prefrontal cortex doesn't pick up. Maybe that more emotional part of the brain, when it's allowed, with all the negative stuff, there's some good stuff that it can pull in. So I think Terry Marks Harlow's got some really good stuff from the psychology realm about using clinical intuition and looking at more of a less of a spiritual outlook. But so there's that, again, there's a biological component to these other things. So would you say overall that it took you some courage to become more of an intuitive healer?
Paul, it probably has, but I think I have such an inner rebel in me that I've come to realize, I didn't know it at the time, that I just kept moving forward because it felt right to me. That it was my intuition. Yeah. So to me, I was just in the flow with it. It wasn't that I was rejecting mainstream healthcare at the time. It was that I knew there was more that I needed to discover, but I didn't know what I didn't know, and I needed to just keep going.
Right.
And so I just kept doing more training, and it kept unfolding, and beautiful synchronicities happened. Seemingly magic happened. Doors opened that I didn't know would open, people who I've met. And so that has been a beautiful process of being in the flow. And so I think there is a part that from that condition of being a young occupational therapist in healthcare, that you have to do things the right way. You need to work in a certain hospital or clinic in order to be respected. And so for several years, I had imposter syndrome because of that. So there was a slight part of me that felt that way. But what's interesting now is that so many more healthcare practitioners, and a lot of them are occupational therapists because that's my mainstream healthcare license. Thousands are contacting me, have been contacting me, and want to know how to do this as well.
Yeah.
They want to know how to do it for their own practice, for their own sanity, because they recognize that there are things in mainstream healthcare that are not functioning the greatest. Some things are going well, but some things have gotten so whittled down. You know, we talked about productivity. It's not healthy. It's not healthy for the practitioners. It's not healthy for the clients and the patients. When I was at the hospital and the Penny George Institute, oftentimes we would say that the staff needed it just as much, if not more, than the patients.
Right.
And so that was also the buy-in. In fact, we started creating large training programs to the healthcare practitioners, and they just soaked it up.
Mm-hmm. It's kind of what you're saying with the rebel. The quote from Albert Einstein popped in my head is something to the extent of, "My contempt for authority drove me to become one."
Oh, wow. Thank you for that. I've never heard that quote, and I think that makes sense. It applies.
And if he didn't say it, it's still a good quote. So, but
You
I think
downloaded it from the
it.
universe for all of us.
Yeah. Well, Emmy, this has just been absolutely wonderful, and it's just so heartening to hear someone who is essentially walking in two worlds, but has made it one world. And I think that's a benefit for everyone. As we kind of wrap this up, would you please let people know, and I'll put a link in the description, certainly to any of your sites, the best way people can work with you, get to know you, those kind of things.
Thank you, Paul. And I've just enjoyed this conversation so much. I could keep talking to you for another hour or two. So basically my website is just my name. It's emmyvadnais.com, EMMYVADNAIS.com. And then you'll see the social media links. I have a YouTube channel and associated with that as well. I've got a lot of free videos. And if you're interested, certainly send me an email, which is just emmy@emmyvadnais.com. And if you're interested in intuition, I'm sure, Paul, you have great resources, but also my intuitive development book, I think is a great resource, but listen to your intuition on how you want to go forward with it.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for talking to me today. And we may have to do a follow-up down the road.
I would love that. Thank you so much, Paul. It's been a pleasure.
Oh, thank you.